open that page, I'll search for my fix, find what I need in the deep dark abyss.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the AI Skeptics podcast. Today we have a special guest that I met in Occupy by a different name. So I'm going to let him introduce himself. Jonathan, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Reiss. I had a checkered past on Wall Street, and then via Occupy Wall Street, where I did meet Kathy, and took on a pseudonym. And now I'm Associate Director of the Media and Democracy Project. The Media and Democracy Project is a nonpartisan, all-volunteer civic organization fighting for more informative, pro-democracy media. We started as a bunch of people that were very passionate about these issues, various aspects of what's wrong with media and how it could be improved. And we're now sort of building ourselves into an organization. One of the top, we work on various things, including press freedom, local journalism, media reform, regulatory issues. We have a case against Fox and have been fighting with the FCC over that. But today I want to talk about what we call casino journalism, which is the misuse of prediction markets by news organizations and what we can do about it.
And I'm going to hand it over to Tom to talk about prediction markets in general. I just want to say that prediction markets aren't all that connected to AI, but I think that their effects on journalism, as we're going to talk about, has a lot in common with what's going on with AI. I think there's just a huge number of commonalities. So I feel like this is kind of setting the table for discussions I want to have in the future, the near future, about how AI and journalism are interacting. But anyway, Tom, kick it off with us for the first topic.
Sure. So Kalshi, Polymarket, and others are prediction markets that people use commonly for sports and political bets. And I guess they have become more or less legal in the U.S. in sort of a free-for-all way over the past 3 years.
Yeah. There were two crucial things. The Supreme Court opened up gambling in general, so that gambling became prevalent, and then the Trump administration, when they came in, basically embraced prediction markets in particular, and so they've exploded since Trump came into office.
Yes, he loves it. The advocates who, I've been following people who follow particularly the betting on politics for a long time, and people say, well, it incorporates the wisdom of the crowd. People are willing to put their money where their mouth is on those things, so they're more accurate than polls. People have been arguing that for a long time. And, until a couple of years ago, the prediction markets were overseas. So there was this, are they really reflective of the U.S.? But now that it's the Wild West for them, they're able to do it here, people seem to think that they're even better predictors of future events. And there doesn't seem to be any limit on the things that you can bet on. I actually don't know how that's governed across the companies, but you can bet on future earthquakes or future snowstorms or things like that, which people do.
Yes.
Or wildfires, as a California
resident.
Let me step in for a second. So Kalshi made a deal with the CFTC, and they're in the U.S. and slightly regulated, but hardly at all, because the Trump administration wants to let them do what they want. Polymarket mostly is still overseas, and you need to use a VPN and not say that you're a U.S. person to trade it. And so that's where the things like the wildfires and the really extreme things are, because it's essentially not regulated.
Mm-hmm. And still actively engaged by
it's if you have a VPN, you can access Polymarket.
Right. Yeah, there's an old saw in insurance that you can't have arsonists, or you can't
Right.
insure against
Someone else's
arson
property.
on someone else's property.
Yep.
Because then there's an incentive to go and set the fire yourself, because you would get the benefits of it, as opposed to insuring your own house, where presumably there would not be an incentive to burn down your own house. Although obviously there are many instances of that, particularly in commercial real estate. So that sort of thing really gets challenged with these prediction markets. I think the notion that you can be just betting on an outcome that you can impact yourself, like famously baseball games in Chicago, or basketball games. College basketball games have been haunted for decades by players being encouraged by the gamblers to affect the outcome of the game.
And now,
which actually the NBA has already had numerous issues come up with that with players.
Just to jump on that point on sports gambling, as related to the Supreme Court decision that you referenced, Jonathan, like the explosion of prop bets for small college games, games where like the action is really small.
Who cares? Yeah.
It's an invitation to direct the outcome, right? I mean, it's like almost unbelievable to think you can have tens of thousands of dollars riding on a prop bet for like a Division III college basketball game. How is that not going to influence the players directly?
So let me actually step in on that for a second, because there's something the Kalshi and Polymarket make a big deal about, the fact that they're better than the bookies because you're not betting against them. You're betting against the sort of the collection of the market is setting the odds. And so first of all, they claim this is a great advance, when in fact, horse racing has been using that mechanism forever. So it's more than 100 years old, that parimutuel betting. It's the same mechanism. So my first thought was that there's no difference, because in both cases, the house is extracting some money and everybody else on average is losing. But then I realized bookies have an incentive to keep insider trading or fixed games, that they care if somebody's manipulating the game that they're betting on. The Polymarket Kalshi actually don't, because you're cheating the other bettors. So, they sort of should, and they say they do, but they don't have a direct incentive. They actually have less incentive to avoid that kind of manipulation than Las Vegas does.
I was just going to say that, like, I remember these prediction markets happening when I was still in finance. This is really old, actually.
They're old. Well, they've been around since the 15th century. There was betting on. There's been on PayPal bets, but recently, yes, the new era, the modern era, started in the late 80s.
What I was going to say is that I heard the argument amongst other quants that insider trading is good, because it actually makes the markets better. Like they're more likely to predict the real answer.
I think one of the principals in Kalshi said that and then kind of took it back, because
he didn't. He only took it back because it looked bad. I mean, it is kind of true. I mean, it is kind of true. Like,
it is kind of true.
The teleprompter did actually know what Trump was going to say,
if you're looking for them as a source of information, it's good that it helps. Makes them more accurate if people who are either have inside information or are manipulating the market are trading. Yes.
We only have a couple more minutes to complain generally about markets, about prediction markets. So I just want to throw in two more, and you get to choose which one to add on to. First of all, Tom rightly pointed out that there is incentive to affect the market that you're betting on. That's awful, right? But I argued, and I still complain about sort of like the Nate Silver political like outcome, like campaign outcome stuff as a bad influence because it makes people feel like the outcome is already decided before they voted. And I think that, so that's not somebody having incentives per se, but it is having an effect on the outcome by just measuring it all the time. So that's one thing I want to bring up. The other thing, which I just would kick myself if we didn't mention, is just how bad this is for young men. Like the prediction markets, it has a hugely addictive and negative effect on the way that young men think about how they're going to live their lives. So I'm just throwing those two out there because we only have a couple minutes.
Yeah, that one appeals to me. Like I've told this story before about how I was at a basketball game and this group of guys in front of us were betting on how many rebounds some player was going to get in the third quarter, like meaningless stuff, and cheering for every stupid thing that had nothing to do with the game. And then my daughter spied one of the kids' TD bank account thing, and it had a balance of like $7 left. He was, blowing all his money on this nonsense, and it just seemed like a path to future heartbreak and misery.
Yeah, so let's start there, and then Kathy, remind me of the first one because I
Nate Silver. Silver.
Yeah. Okay. So that's actually a good transition to the use of news. So in terms, yes, it's addictive. First of all, even before we get to the addictive and the fact that it's draining money out of young men's bank accounts, it changes the way you think of it. As you say, instead of rooting for a team, you're now rooting for a player to get X number of rebounds. It financializes, it makes us look at, think about an election as something I can profit on instead of something that's going to affect my life and the lives of my community. It has kind of corrupting effects in a broad way, and it is addictive. And some professors have documented how the apps are designed to be addictive, just like social media. But it's worse because gambling is more addictive and is more costly. So yes, getting to the Nate Silver, which is sort of a good transition. I'm sorry?
Do the markets themselves say anything about what their function or role is generally? Are they like, we're here so that we can predict accurately what's going to happen, or they admit that we're here to make money off the rake of these bets, or what?
Well, they call themselves, one of them actually calls themselves the truth machine, and they very much sell the wisdom of crowds. We're going to provide insight into these important questions, even though 90% of their business is sports. And we could already bet on sports without them. But they very much promote the idea that they provide more accurate, forecasts than polls. Let me touch on that for a minute, because polls aren't meant to be predictive. So the fact that they beat polls is not such a huge accomplishment, particularly because they have the poll information, and so then they make some modest incremental improvement over that. Experts, when we compare them, say, to 538, to Nate Silver, and things like that, the prediction markets do not seem to do particularly better if it's compared to experts. And actually, Phil Tetlock, who's done a lot of work on decision on this kind of thing and has run his own prediction markets, has found that elite forecasters, that if you just take the people who do best in these competitions, they outperform the crowd, even though they don't have the diversity, the benefit of the wisdom of crowds. They have the benefit of actually being good at what they're doing.
But I guess that the just spot prices off of these prediction markets are easy to come by, so they're being used a lot in journalism. So I'll bring us on to the second topic now.
Perfect.
Will you tell us a little bit about how prediction markets are being used by traditional media and news outlets? What's going on now?
So the simple thing is, they're, as you pointed out, they're a free source and they're available in everything. So one thing is, it's just an attractive thing to use. If you want to, is this bill going to pass? You can look up Kalshi or Polymarket and they'll give you a forecast. the other is that some of them have made financial deals with them and have not disclosed the terms, but are running what are positioned as news stories, but are basically advertisements for for the markets, and then come complete with links to, you can click on the story and get to the Peli market.
Yeah. I just wanted to call out one thing in an article that you shared was pointing out some Wall Street Journal headlines that are basically what you're saying. It's just a headline that's like, Polymarket says, this is the probability that X is going to happen.
Yes.
And it reminded me so much of a story I read a while ago about misinformation on the internet. How does misinformation, become widely circulated? And this was tracing it back to like Russian Kremlin misinformation campaigns of the 80s. And they told a very detailed story where it's like they place a story that is fabricated in a tiny English language newspaper in India. And then they get an English language newspaper in Germany to quote the India story. And then the Guardian quotes the Germany one. And then finally the Times quotes the Guardian. It's like you build up this,
Right.
series of layers of legitimacy around just junk. And it occurs to me the same exact thing can happen. You have a small Poly market or Kalshi market, you juice it up in a particular direction, get it covered in the news, and suddenly it's a thing, which to Kathy's earlier point, it's like, oh, it seems like it's a real thing. It seems like it's a done deal. And it made me wonder if that's happening now.
So it's hard to know. I mean, there are studies that say they are manipulable, and that you can manipulate them if you try. We don't have, there's I don't have hard evidence that it has. Well, I mean, we know there's been insider trading. There's been lots of documentation of that, and some people accused of it quite credibly. But in terms of the juicing stories, it's not clear. But one kind of scenario that may have happened with the LA mayor's race, I don't know that it did, but the right-wing candidate was forecast to come in second and continued to be forecast to come in second even after the election results, which, and again, initially it looked like that, but people knew that the mail-in votes were going to be more favorable to the other Democrat. It could be that somebody manipulated that to undermine the result of the election. So if you wanted to say the result is invalid, one thing you could do is boost the candidate who really lost in the
right
in the markets, and then say, see, the wisdom of crowds thinks that this guy came in second, but the election board is telling us this other person did.
And Jonathan, I don't know if this is the main thing that you wanted to talk about, but it reminds me of the fact that there is like a weird like gas station that's charging way less per gallon for gas, and it's like big, and it's like a big pro-Trump gas station. I know it's crazy, and there's only a few of them, but it's like somebody's willing to lose quite a bit of money on making some kind of political point, and I'm just totally imagining that happening in the sort of mayor's race scenario, where it's like a mid-market kind of gamble. It's not going to be that expensive to make a point,
right?
And to the point, it reminds me of one of the other articles you sent us, which was like that this is not even as good as a poll, because a poll is like each person gets one vote, whereas this is what's called a wealth-weighted poll. So the more money you have, the more your vote counts.
Yes.
And of course, the people who are pro prediction markets are like, well, you put your money where your mouth is, and you put more money where you believe it more. And in some sense, that makes sense if everyone was really just voting for what they thought was true. But to your earlier point, like if they're just voting to make a point, which is like, oh, this election was invalid, then they could just say, let's blow $1 billion on this instead of lobbying. And it's like they're going to spend $1 billion one way or the other on political maneuvering. So, like, why not here?
Yeah, and it's not. I don't think it's not close to $1 billion that you'd need to blow, as you point out.
Yeah.
So yes, and it also could actually pay for itself. That not in this scenario, but an emerging candidate could boost themselves in the prediction markets and then go out and fundraise and say, "See, I'm a viable candidate," and actually raise more money potentially than they spent boosting themselves in the prediction market. So
That's a
yes,
good
there's
point.
various scenarios that where they could be used, and particularly if they're being used to spur news campaigns, you can influence the
has that
coverage
been
that a candidate gets. So even apart
has
from
that
the fundraising.
sorry
Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
has that been suggested that doofus in LA was betting his
I
campaign funds?
I am
That's
not
fascinating.
I am not suggesting it.
I'm
I
not
don't
attributing that to you. Okay, it's kind of
I don't have any
I will
evidence that
say,
that is the
as an
case.
Angelino who voted in that election and then waited for days, while the returns were coming in, it seemed like Pratt was in second. You were sitting around in second, and Rahman was like in third. And it was a surprise to me when Rahman overtook Pratt. Not because I had not been watching any prediction markets or anything, but just the chatter, the vibes was like, oh, Pratt seems like he has a chance here. So. I don't know if prediction markets played into that, but
Yeah, I don't either. I just it could have, and if not in that case, it could be used in that way.
So,
there
Jonathan,
was a
what should we be doing? What are the rules that are wrong? What should we be changing? What are our
Okay.
demands?
So I know Kathy and I had come from where we're on Wall Street, where self-regulation is a joke, but thankfully the journalism industry is more, has higher standards for itself. Because let me actually start with the rules themselves. So the CFTC is trying to squelch the states that are trying to make. Minnesota, for instance, voted overwhelmingly to make prediction markets illegal in the CFTC. The Department of Justice promptly took them to court, saying states don't get to do that. So we definitely think that states should be allowed to make prediction markets illegal, but they're going to be around because not every state's going to do that. So we're going to have prediction markets. As far as the use in news, we don't think the government should get involved for First Amendment censorship kinds of reasons. But we do think that the journalist community, and particularly organizations like the Society of Professional Journalists and the AP, which has standards, and organizations like that should set standards to constrain their use, or potentially, we would make a case for basically not using them at all, and teaching the reporters, having sort of statements to educate the reporters as to the flaws of them. So there's we have 6 standards, and we're working on others. And hold on just a second, let me find my notes because I'm switching pages. There they are. Okay. So some of them are very straightforward extensions of existing rules that the SPJ, the Society of Professional Journalists, and others have, like not making deals that create conflict of interest, like Dow Jones Wall Street Journal has done. If they are going to make any agreements of that sort, they should disclose them, which they haven't, but clearly should. Journalists should not trade prediction markets on the things. And one other thing, we prefer to call them prediction gambling markets. Prediction markets is the industry's term. And the gambling should definitely be in it because there's no doubt that they are gambling. So anyway, we would say no prediction market trading by journalists at all. The ProPublica has actually revised their guidelines to that effect. We'd say they shouldn't take ads from them because they're promoting an addictive product. Those are kind of in line with things that have been done in the past. There's one technical one, which is that there should be audit logs. This is to address there was an Israeli journalist whose life was threatened because the prediction market bettors wanted him to change his story so that they would win in the markets as opposed to losing, which is pretty frightening. somebody from the Freedom of the Press Foundation suggested to us when we talked to them about these that if there were audit logs so that the reporter couldn't unilaterally change the story and there'd be a record of it and they'd need an editor, that would provide them some degree of comfort. And that's actually something that large organizations do anyway, is good practice. So those four are pretty.
Besides for the audit log, how about just like a threat reporting, database? Like, it strikes me that story where the Israeli Times journalist is getting threatened by bettors because what they report, whether it was shrapnel that landed in this place
Right.
or a fragment of a missile that landed in that place, is like, now there's big money for particular individuals riding on that
Yes.
fact.
Outcome.
And so it seems unavoidable that journalists are going to get caught in the crosshairs of this, like by financializing. It actually made me think, if it's a truth machine, it's a truth machine that's fully financialized. And so it's going to be used in that way, right? So, like, is there any rule we can make that would protect journalists from those kind of scenarios?
This is the best we've come up with. And actually, I don't know. The other thing would be for them to stop to say you can't use us as a source to resolve your markets. Some things, so boards of elections.
What are the rules for that? How do those best get resolved in on the various platforms?
They have a committee that judges it. So there actually is a sort of technical things that one of them decided that we did not invade Venezuela. There was a market on whether we would invade Venezuela, that had insider trading and had various problems. But one of them was that one of the markets said no, resolved that to no, because they didn't consider going and kidnapping Maduro to be an invasion. And that's a question. It's not exactly clear. You sort of have to read the fine print and can argue about it. And I think that case may have been taken to court. They try and write them to have a resolution mechanism, but they can be unclear.
I was reading about a resolution mechanism for like a crazy bet that went totally off the rails about whether somebody was going to mention somebody else's name during some kind of gaming competition. And the arbiters of these conflicts are also like wealth weighted votes where so you can just bribe someone to vote in your favor for a certain resolution. Like it's very meta in a certain way. Like you started out this conversation talking about like the financialization of social facts, like everything has become a transaction. And we only have a couple minutes left, but can you go meta? Like, can you talk about this sort of high level, like, what does it mean about our culture if everything is a bet?
Yeah. Okay. We think it's terrible. It's again, I kind of more care about casino or feel more expert on casino journalism, which is.
Yeah. Well, everything's a bet in journalism. That's no good either.
Yes. No, it's not. But I don't have anything. I'm not an ethicist. I'd rather talk to there are more mundane reasons not to use. I think that's terrible. I don't feel like I'm the right person to explain why that's terrible. So more of even on more mundane things. So they're not as good as they claim to be. They have for news organizations to be promoting an addictive product that's going to be harmful to their readers. The influence of money and potential manipulation of the news, the simple things like they can't. So if they're talking to an anonymous source, they can talk to the source and understand why they're saying what they're saying and what their motivations are. When they look at a prediction market, they're basically using an anonymous source that they don't even know who it is, and they have no idea what their motivations are. So I think that aside from the social effects, the immorality of it, which I don't mean to dismiss, I just don't feel I'm not the one to talk about. I feel funny talking about making
Well, I
moral
don't feel
judgments.
funny
Well,
talking about it.
I
Let
want
me
to
just
jump
put it
on
this
what
way:
you.
like
Okay, so I'll
we're
let you.
dealing
You can riff on
we're,
it. That's great.
we're dealing with that like virus that's making people have explosive diarrhea, right? And we found out that the like positive, it was a false positive for a particular like Tyson Foods thing. But then what was interesting about it is like they're like,
Taylor.
well, the evidence is much deeper than that. Like what we're actually doing is interviewing people who got sick and asking them where did they eat and like what did they eat and where did they eat and when did they eat that, and like they interviewed hundreds of people, and it was like a really actually a deep journalistic endeavor.
Yes.
And then they had this one test that they were just like, actually, and that was wrong, although it gave the right result for the wrong reason, I guess, because it ended up being that, in fact, that same company. But what I liked about it was that there was a guy who was explaining all this, and then it was like, yeah, I don't even know why that test had to be front and center in these kinds of conversations, because ultimately this is a journalistic endeavor,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it is human, and it is like a sort of gathering of evidence, and it's deep, and it's complicated. I guess we all just, it's like, I'll just finish by saying, like, the thing is that the prediction markets make us flatten everything. And I think journalism isn't supposed to be flat. Journalism, good journalism, right, complicates things. So like
Yes.
it makes us think about things in 3 dimensions or more, right? We think about it from different perspectives. Like, what about the farm workers type question,
Right.
who are being blamed for these outbreaks and stuff like that. And that's from my perspective, one of the most pernicious aspects of prediction markets is that it flattens everything to just, in other words, I would argue that even if these markets were not manipulable, even if they were completely correct,
Yes.
and they always gave the correct answer, it would still be a problem.
I totally agree. And also, it makes things binary. They're by their nature. So there are Supreme Court judgments that there's betting markets on. And the Supreme Court judgment is often not a yes or no. There's nuance to it, and all sorts of stories, as you say, like the
illusion of binary outcome.
Yeah, it right. It greatly degrades our discourse.
I was thinking of the
Kathy, that you described was like.
Wait, just Tom is about to say something. Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, you were talking about the resolution dispute boards or whatever. That was sounding to me a lot like credit default swap issues. When a default is declared, there's sort of a meeting of the minds of the relevant parties to discern whether it was a default. Now, that seems obvious, right? Oh, here's default defined in the document. Did that happen? And even in those cases, it's not clear. It's not an obvious answer a lot of times. And if it's not where it's a defined term, if you can't even tell whether it's a default or not, then, that's sort of symbolic of how non-binary the world actually is, I guess.
So actually, let me riff on that a little bit. So there was an issue of whether Khomeini was deposed, because one of them ruled again that he was killed. He was still supreme leader when he was killed. So he wasn't deposed. He was assassinated. And that's I think that's a defensible argument. But the broader point is we shouldn't be betting on whether Khomeini is going to be deposed or not. That's not something we should turn into something that people are speculating on in the financial sense.
Jake, you want to have a last word?
Yeah, I'll bring it back to AI. And I'm just drafting off what you mentioned about flatness. I was thinking about parallels between prediction markets and AI. And the one that occurred to me is they are a probabilistic kind of mashup of information or content or bets, in a similar way that large language models are probabilistic mashup of language, but there's no underlying model for truth or for the mechanism that produces that outcome. It's a mashup, and as we've pointed out here, it's a wealth weighted mashup. but it is a black box, in some sense. Like the mechanism behind that black box is understood, but we don't know who made which bets at what time necessarily. So it's like AI in that sense. It reduces a really jagged thing into a single statistic or a spot price by way of a corporately owned black box, which is, what did we say, fully financialized.
So I'm glad you tied this to AI. I'm very
I'm
glad.
glad
Thank you very much for having me on. I've
Jonathan,
enjoyed
thank
this
you so much
discussion.
for coming. I appreciate you. And by the way, Jonathan got onto our podcast by writing to me saying, "Hey, I like your podcast. I've been listening to it." So for anybody out there who's like, "Wait, I have something to talk about," you should totally write to us because Jake is about to tell you the email address where you should write.
Write to us at aiskeptics@oceannetwork.net.
Ocean Network with 2 N's in the middle there. Okay, thanks, guys. Thank you for listening and see you next week.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Jonathan.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.